You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Coming out of the All-Star break, we've got lots of excitement with the White Sox. Tons of excitement.
A flurry of activity, a flurry of things.
Yeah, we've got young guys coming up. We got Maldonado out the door. Danny Mendick's been DFA'd, and surprisingly, a guy like Danny Mendick doesn't get grabbed up by somebody. He's in Charlotte now.
Yeah, surprising is maybe not the word.
It's amazing that when we DFA people, teams are chomping at the bit for these players. Just run out and just snag them. You got John Schriffen calling out folks over at the Sun-Times in tweets, which is amazing to me. You have teams that are inquiring, offering players to the White Sox. Multiple reports out there. Teams like the Padres and the Dodgers. You know the Phillies are involved in there. There's all these different teams trying to get players. They're all getting turned down. The asking price seems really high. So there's a lot going on, a lot to dive into here. This episode brought to you, as always, by Cork and Carry at the Park in the shadow of the ballpark at 33rd and Princeton. Remember the big event coming up, the Friday, the kickoff, the 9th of August, the kickoff to Cubs Sox, 5 p.m., Sox in the Basement from the 108. Out at Cork and Carry for a live show that will not be broadcast. This is going to have speakers. We are going to probably take some audience questions. We're getting some guests together and some giveaways. It's going to be kind of a fun thing to do before you go into the ballpark, kicking off at 5 p.m. Incredible food, award-winning burgers, a great price. Bring the whole family out, indoor, outdoor seating, and every game, it is your place for pregame, postgame, and in-game viewing of the White Sox. Cork and Carry at the Park. See more at corkandcarry.com. The first thing I want to get into are the new players. Forget the Schriffen thing. That's just high school drama. If we got time by the end of the show, I'll bring that up.
We'll talk about that still. Yeah. But I agree. I mean, it's some of the stuff that goes on around this team at this point, with whether it's sniping between fans on Twitter or anything like that. I mean, I think there's just a lot of frustration out there.
If they were winning, nobody would care.
Exactly.
If they were winning, none of this stuff would matter to anybody. And this is because they're just so bad. I mean, 71 losses before the All-Star break. They blew past the record by 2 games. Nobody had ever lost 70. They're like, we're going to do 71. So, I mean, that's the team we're watching.
Hey, at least we're watching history here. I mean, we're
watching all kinds
bad
of history.
But it's still history. We can say we were here for this. I mean, tell my great-grandchildren.
Print the T-shirts. The thing that I'm most excited about is Brooks Baldwin getting up here.
Yes.
That guy, I think that guy has an opportunity to actually get up here, stick, and be something. And if he does, it'll be one of those rarities where the White Sox drafted somebody later in a draft and developed him. But he's jumped multiple levels this year, and he's been hitting the crap out of the ball. He can play. I know second base is probably where he's going to end up. He can move over to third as well. I think you start him at second, and I think what you have to do is hope that Pedro is going to put him in the order every single day. Like this, his promotion or any promotion of these young players, if those guys are not given consistent, regular at-bats, then you're allowing this manager who is clearly a lame duck to get in the way of future development. And that's my biggest fear with these guys coming up, because you want this guy to come up, get as many at-bats as humanly possible. I mean, like, here we go. Like, James Fox puts it out there. Switch hitter posting a 144 WRC plus with the Barons this year.
Yeah.
23 homers over the last 3 years. He was a 12th rounder in 2022. You want to give him an opportunity. His name's come up on this show multiple times. It's come up when we've had the prospect guys on. Well, when we get guys like Elijah Evans, who was just on the last episode from Just Baseball with the one of the best quick breakdowns of the entire draft. If you missed that, go back and check it out. James Fox has been on a couple times in the last couple of months. Baldwin keeps coming up. I didn't know if he was going to get here so quick. I feel like him showing up now signifies we're going to see more youth, more young pitching, and possibly more young players getting a crack before this season is over.
Well, and which stands to reason, and especially somebody like Baldwin, who, if his bat to ball skills are as advertised and as they've been in the minor leagues, then he's the type of guy that can come up and make a better transition than somebody, for example, like Oscar Colas, who is run into it and hit it very, very far away. And, and Baldwin also is a guy that can move around the diamond. Now, he's been an infielder, but he's played some outfield. He's played all around the diamond. So he's maybe a guy that what they're looking at too, and maybe this is what we're going to see, is how does he play in these various spots? Not because they want him to be a utility guy necessarily, although that might be what he ultimately becomes, but also to see, look, going into next year, is he somebody that maybe we count on to be able to handle the majority of at-bats at second base, for example.
That's what you're hoping.
But then still be somebody that, for instance, gives us the flexibility to have as an outfielder because he can play out there? Or is he somebody that if we manage to put together a complete infield where we still want Brooks Baldwin in the lineup, will his bat play in the outfield? Will his bat play anywhere else?
He can stand at third too.
Yeah, he's actually played a lot of third.
Right. I mean, the Senzel thing is a weird signing because that's a failed prospect who was a really high pick that everybody thought was going to be a superstar, and it has not worked out for him. On the other hand, he's another one that should get nonstop at bats and stand at third base permanently for the next couple of weeks to see what you have. And the only reason you're doing that is not because you think Nick Senzel is going to be a great ball player or even last the season. What you're doing is very similar to other rebuilding teams or teams that are like, let's take a crack at this guy. Maybe there's something there. The best example is the Pittsburgh Pirates this year grabbed Joey Bart off of the scrap heap in the exact same way because they were having catching trouble. They had injuries at catcher. They were dumb enough to sign Yasmani Grandal, and they had all these problems at that position. The young guys weren't ready. There was an injury to one of their young big prospects. The other guy, Henry Davis, wasn't ready yet. And Grandal couldn't start the season, and they had all kinds of problems. So what do? They grab a guy that another team gave up on who was a high pedigree, high draft pick that had just not panned out. If you look at Joey Bart right now, over the last couple of months with the Pirates, is finally exactly what everybody thought he was going to be. That may happen. You probably got a 1 in 10 chance or a 1 in 20 chance that it happens. But you take a shot in a season like this in the hopes that it'll happen for you. So you bring Senzel up. I think you stick him over at third base and you let him play there for the next couple of weeks. And you let Baldwin play second base for the next couple of weeks. And you give these guys a legitimate opportunity. And your manager should not be, they played last night, so they need 2 nights off. You cannot do this. At this point, you're going to lose a ton of games. The mandate from the front office has to be, we sign this guy to see what he is because we want to make a decision on him and move to something else if he isn't what we want him to be. And so that's what you have to do, because in 2-3 weeks, you want to be able to sit there and say, okay, we know what Senzel is. We think he can do it, or we want to keep him around and see more, or you're releasing him. And then you're making another move. I think he's the guy now that stands at third base until Moncada is ready. And if he lights it on fire, he keeps it. And you're like, wow, we just did what the Pirates did with Bart. And if he doesn't light it on fire, he won't be on the team in a month.
Well, and the third possibility, too, is that you have an opportunity to give Nick Senzel a chance to rebound his season a little bit and, like you said, light it on fire, show he can do some things. Senzel's also a guy that can maybe move around the diamond a little bit, too. And so you might be sitting there if you're Chris Getz going, look, Danny Mendick isn't doing anything for anybody at this point, all right? So let me see if Senzel comes in here, if he makes an impact, and if he's somebody that then I can flip for somebody else even, okay? Because, again, signed a major league contract with the White Sox, and he might be a guy that a team looks at and goes, look, if Nick Senzel, if the White Sox found something with him where he's playing adequately at least, maybe it's something where another team also looks at it and goes, look, I'll give you the bag of balls for this guy, or I'll give you the low minors guy, some potential bullpen arm for the future or something like that. And if you're Chris Getz, all you've lost is a couple of weeks of Lenyn Sosa not getting it done at third. And especially if you're done with Lenyn Sosa in general.
Oh, they're done. They're done. After you see him have that nice little stretch that we talked about, and then he kind of goes in the dumps for a week or so, and they're like, that's it. That we cannot handle any more of this. He may pop back and forth between the organization, like the MLB and AAA is like a depth piece when guys are injured, but I don't think he's ever going to be in their plans again. And I don't know if it's the right or wrong choice, but a lot of the things we do on this show is like, what are they doing? You could see they identify him now as somebody that just is not going to be anything more than a AAA piece that can be brought up to the majors when they need a body that can take a couple of different positions.
Yeah, because if he was really in the plans, you don't mind a slump off of him, especially in a season like this where nothing's going right anyway. So who cares? Because you're going to sit there and say, okay, well, let me see how he comes out of the slump. But the minute and they've been doing this with him consistently, the minute he goes down, as far as his productivity and his ability to get something done at the plate, they've sent him back. I mean, they've been really consistent with that. So I don't think it's something where you can look at that and say, okay, well, they're just giving him a chance to right himself in AAA. I think if they're going to do this, they're going to give him every opportunity to right himself in the majors. Think about what they did early on in the season with Dominic Fletcher, where they kept him in the lineup almost far too long, given what he was doing, but they really wanted him to try and work it out at the major league level, versus what they've done with Oscar Colas, where clearly they've given up on him. And, he doesn't even really get a chance anymore to show what he can do. They just don't believe in him. So I think all the proof you need is right there in Lenyn Sosa getting sent down just because he's in yet another slump. And also Brooks Baldwin being brought up then to get an opportunity. And then somebody like Nick Senzel getting signed, because if you believed in Sosa, you don't send him down. And also Danny Mendick just gets shipped to the bench if you want to bring Baldwin up. Or, Mendick gets shipped out and Baldwin gets brought up because, you're flopping that around.
Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They are not traveling salesmen who show up at your door with a dingy little example and you got to look in a book and try to pick out what your windows are going to look like. Instead, get into their big, beautiful showroom where there's an owner on site and also on site when they put in your windows. All Window and Door Superstore installers, they don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands are custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is 1/2 block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. You don't go with a Nick Senzel over somebody in your own organization that's been around for a while if you still believe in that guy. You don't bring in Senzel. They as an organization decided that somebody else's trash that had not worked out but had a higher pedigree was better than the guy that they had stuck with and they were developing over the last couple of years. And it is shades of what we heard Elijah Evans talk about last week with the draft. If you look at what they did in the draft, again, I thought this was the most fascinating thing, and it's the direction of the organization now is to find pitchers that, and they use that word, humility. The team used that. Mike Shirley used that, okay? Guys that are able to be told, we want you to add this pitch. We want you to change the way you do things. You're now in the Brian Bannister system. We're going to make you great. And they don't push back. So they went and they got a bunch of arms they could develop, but they chased mostly, with the exception of a few prep picks, they chased guys that already had developed as hitters by being in college for a long amount of time, already have their process. They don't have to start at scratch with them because they've never been able to prove as an organization that they can take raw hitting and turn it into something. They are instead now interested in people that already have their process, may need to be tweaked a little bit, or that they think they can fix, but they don't want to start at scratch with hitters. So what is Senzel? Senzel fits that. He did make it to the bigs. He has been around. They may, scouting-wise, see something they think can be tweaked. They can't restart him, but at least he comes from probably an organization before that may have taught him how to do the day-to-day stuff, which they always seem to lack at doing when it comes to their positional players. So like that move itself kind of reminded me of the conversation with Elijah on the last show. The idea that if they're going and getting hitters, they want guys that are right there near getting to the majors. In their draft, they want guys that have developed further. In most cases, even though they did take a couple of prep guys because of the high ceiling, they mainly want guys that are more established or kind of, have a process or a little bit more developed when they're drafting. And that's what they're looking for, I think, in trades, which is why you keep hearing of teams like the Padres and everybody else offering things to the White Sox for Crochet or Robert and getting turned down. Because a quick look at all of these teams that have been making these offers, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Phillies, all these teams that are supposedly knocking on the door for Robert or Crochet, their top 10 prospects are either pitchers, which they're already deep on and may not fit what Bannister wants, catching, which they already have with Caro and Lee. They think they're pretty sound there. If they take somebody, it's got to be somebody that they're convinced is going to beat one of those two out in their battery. They have so many other holes, they really don't need to look at catcher. And the majority of the position players are so underdeveloped, they're in A-ball. And they're years away from the majors. And that's why they're not making a move right now, because nobody's been able to give them a package that fits their new philosophy.
Well, and I saw, Pat Ragazzo of Sports Illustrated saying Chicago's believed to be asking for at least 2 controllable major league players or close to big league ready pieces and 2 top 5 prospects if Garrett Crochet is going to be traded off the White Sox. And so to that point, when you look at say, the Dodgers, and what do the Dodgers have to offer? Well, their top position player, their top overall prospect right now is Dalton Rushing, who's a catcher, and Jose DePaula, who's an outfielder, but he's in high A.
19 in A-ball.
Yeah.
That's too far away. That's not what they're looking for.
And Rushing, is he a guy that what you're looking at for a catcher then, is he a guy whose bat is going to so clearly play that he would, supplant Andrew Vaughn at first base, which, I realize I'm setting a low bar there, but is he a guy that you move off of the catcher position because of his bat?
Well, the scouting report on him is that he's the kind of guy that you're going to like his bat more than you're going to like him behind the plate. So then what are you getting? You're getting a first baseman. And you're sitting there going, okay, well, that makes sense if you decide you're finally moving on from guys like Vaughn and Sheets, because you can't throw them in the outfield. We've already seen that, and I hate it. I hate it when they do it with Sheets now. I hated it when they did it with Vaughn before. So, again, he doesn't fit. That's the problem with the Dodgers. You've got him and DePaul up at the top, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pitchers coming next. And again, that is not a need for them. And then you have another catcher who again, they don't need. And then you go back to catcher, first base, pitcher, outfielder, and A-ball. The Dodgers don't have anything the White Sox want. That's why you get the report of they're asking for too much and they're turning down deals right away. It doesn't fit what they're trying to do.
Well, and it doesn't fit what they need. So they need, and I'm sure what Chris Getz has probably said is like, okay, Andy Pages, give me that guy, an outfielder that we can develop, a guy who's already in the majors, who's got, a seemingly high ceiling and is a 23-year-old rookie who, could be a guy that, you could see him and Luis Robert Jr. as running mates together in the outfield for a very long time. But are the Dodgers willing to go that route and do that when they're relying on this kid to play in their outfield as it is? And the answer is probably not. So the Dodgers are sitting there going, yeah, but look at these wonderful prospects that we have. And Getz is rightfully so saying, no, I'm not interested in waiting 5 years for a guy because I'm not doing that. I'm not rebuilding the way that people have historically rebuilt. I'm not waiting on guys who are on high A.
And he doesn't need to trade these guys. We keep saying
he doesn't need to trade.
He doesn't need to trade. If he waits till the offseason, he now will be trading a pitcher in Crochet that still has 2 years of control if he really, really wants to get, like, if the thought process in the front office is, okay, we're a major market team. The draft doesn't set up very well for us. There's all these restrictions. That's why we can't even draft in the top 10, even though we're going to have the worst record in baseball history. Okay. And so because our owner's never going to spend, we've decided we're going to do a ton of controllable arms because he'll never do a lot with his pitching. He'll never sign those big $200-300 million deals for 5-6 years for pitchers. So we know we can't do that. So this is what we're going to do with our pitching staff. Fine. We have a plan. Now we've got to find hitters. And yes, we may be able to spend some money in free agency, but if we're going to bring guys along, we want them to be close to ready, and because we're not good at developing hitters. So we hope that other teams have actually done the parts that we're not good at, and then we can just kind of get them at the end. So that's what we want. So I have this pitcher that everybody wants. If I can get that, if I can get those kind of players, I'll deal them because it's so hard for us to find those kind of players. As an organization, it's our shortcoming. If that's the justification, fine. But you will have a pitcher then in Crochet with 2 years control who have finished out what looks to be a spectacular season and will probably be more valuable than what Dylan Cease was, because now he will have no innings limits on him. He will have finished off a good year. He'll be ready to go, and he'll have 2 years control instead of 1 year of control. And so then you sit there and you can hold up anybody that wants to add him as a pitcher on that deal. Now teams that may not be in the competition market this year, but are trying to build their roster and they're looking for the next couple year window, you add teams that may be interested in Crochet if you wait till the offseason. Plus, I think you increase his value because you're not dealing with this innings limit that everybody really knows is there because the guy's never pitched this much, ever. I think that if Getz pulls a move before the deadline, and it isn't what we all know they want. It's a complete and total failure. He cannot take the best offer available. He has to take the offer that's right, or he has to hold. Just like he seemed to be willing to do with Cease, he can definitely do it with guys like Crochet with 2 years left after this year and Robert with 3. You have to hold serve, because eventually they'll either pay your price or you'll have to sit down and figure out something else. Don't give away guys at a lesser value than what they're at. The Broadcast Basement On Demand Radio Network, which is basically a fancy way of saying podcast network, has been around for 6 years, and Sox in the Basement's one of the big shows on there. We've got a lot of shows that cover the Chicagoland area. Sox in the Basement, Future Sox, Southside Pod, the EP podcast, and so many more. And we've got millions of listener streams and downloads collected in just this past year. If your Chicago area business is looking for a way to get a message out, and you would like to do that at a rate of less than 1 cent per listener, ask yourself why you hear all of these incredible companies sticking with the Broadcast Basement year in and year out, because advertising works. If you're interested, have more questions, 773-653-4398.
You've brought up the name Anthony Santander a few times.
Yes,
okay, as a guy
that would be fine out in the outfield, and I would overpay for him.
Right.
Let's say his market value is 12. I'll give him 15 a year. I mean, that's really high for the White Sox. That would match their biggest contract ever that they gave to Benintendi. But I mean, you're going to have to start doing it. If this is your philosophy now, if your philosophy is we want to control pitching and we want to run them through the Bannister system and just have arm after arm after arm that we can deal with to get other players and that we can use to fill our rotation and our relief pitching staff, because they basically drafted an entire relief pitching staff in this draft, okay, of really high-end relievers. That's what they went out and did, because they don't want to spend a lot of money on pitching anymore. If that's your plan, you got to sign more of those deals. And I would give him that deal. I would be the highest bidder for his services, and I try to sign him early to fix one of my need positions.
But you can hold on to Crochet, for example, or you can hold on to even Eric Fetty, for example, and sit there and say, okay, we were able to go out into the marketplace, and now we know that we have these guys in our outfield for so many years. We've got these guys in our infield for so many years. You mentioned Edgar Caro and Corey Lee as the catchers. We know that we've got those guys in place for their controllable future. You can target now with Garrett Crochet where it makes sense for them to try and get players back. So if you go into the offseason and you've discovered that Brooks Baldwin is going to be one of your starting infielders, and you think Colson Montgomery is going to come along at some point next year and take that shortstop spot, and your big gap are on the corner infield, well, then going to the Orioles about, say, Kobe Mayo and Samuel Basallo, who are, guys who can play those corner infield spots and look like they're going to be hitters that have really high ceilings and can be really high caliber guys in the MLB, that's where you target versus somebody who's going to offer you an outfielder, somebody who's going to offer you a middle infielder that you maybe don't want to bring along because you're not sure what you're going to do with him. That said, that's where a Brooks Baldwin becomes really important, because if his bat plays anywhere in the infield, then he gives you positional flexibility, not just on a day in and day out basis for Pedro to screw up the lineup, but he gives you the positional flexibility to sit there and say, okay, Garrett Crochet, I'm dangling Garrett Crochet, but I know who I'm going after. So the Yankees right now can call and say, we don't really want to give you Spencer Jones or Jansen Dominguez. And in the offseason, Chris Getz can sit there and go, you know what, but that's what I really need. I really need an outfielder. So who's got the best outfielder that I can get that's going to give me the longest amount of control? And if Garrett Crochet is the cost of that, is that a worthwhile pickup? Or is it something where Eric Fetty becomes that? Or is it something where one of the other arms, one of the young guys that they're sitting there going, okay, we like this guy. We like Nick Nastrini, but we don't really love Nick Nastrini. Somebody else wants to take a shot at him. They're going to give us this major league ready outfielder. We're all good. He did that with Christian Mina and Dominic Fletcher. It just didn't work out the way he wanted to. But that type of flexibility you get in the offseason. Right now, you just have to take what a contending team, what an interested team is willing to give you. And for example, with the Padres, you've already plucked clean what you want from their system. So what are they going to give you off of their major league roster? Are they giving you Jackson Merrill? No, probably not.
No, the only system that really matches is the Orioles, right? I mean, unless I'm missing something. I mean, the Phillies are in the same boat as the Padres are in the same boat as the Dodgers. And every time I look up a team and I look at the Orioles and I go, okay, well, you've got lots of players that fit what the White Sox want, but they won't give them up. And which is really, it's strange because they don't have enough room on their 26-man roster for all of them. And now you're hearing Jackson Holliday. A lot of people are predicting he could get moved, and which makes me nervous because the White Sox would be dumb enough to go get a guy that actually isn't that good, although he seems like he's going to be good. He did not get a very long time up there. He's only 20 years old. He'd be a great guy to get. A Kobe Mayo off of their team would be a great guy to get. A Connor Norby wouldn't be the worst addition at 24 years old, a guy who can play second base for you. You can grab plenty of different players off of that roster, either that are on their major league roster that are really young because they have so much depth, or on their minor league roster. The problem is they don't want to pay it. They don't want to give that to anybody. They're actually the inverse of what most teams are right now. You look in most systems, everybody's pitching heavy, and you look at the Orioles, and they're like the opposite. And you're like, well, okay, let's make a deal. This makes perfect sense. We fit, you fit, let's make a deal. And they're like, nope, we don't want to do that. It's weird. It's really strange that they have gone in a completely different thing. And it's working for them right now. I mean, they're winning at the major league level. It is a weird, odd thing, though, to see a team that is so different. Their top 10 is like the inverse of everybody else. We got a middle infielder, catcher, first base. We've got another guy who can play the infield, first base, third base. We've got an outfielder. We've got a second base outfielder. We've got an outfielder. The first pitcher that shows up is 7th in their top 10. There's 3 pitchers in their top 10 total and 7 position players. They're like the absolute opposite. And most of them are in AAA or AA performing at a very high level. They're like the one team that matches up with like every other team in baseball who has pitching but doesn't have players. And the White Sox are like the perfect example of that team. That's exactly what the White Sox want, is exactly what the Orioles have. What the Orioles need is exactly what the White Sox have. And the Orioles are like, yeah, but we don't want to give any of those players up. I think they're the only team that matches with the Sox to get Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet goes if the Orioles pay the price.
But they're never going to pay the price.
No, they're never going to pay the price because that's too simple, Ed. See, I want simple things with my baseball club. I want them to get better. I want them to have a competent manager. I want them to stop lying to me, right? I hate the PR machine. I get aggravated. Martin Maldonado leaves, and we didn't really mention it that much today because there's really nothing to say except he was terrible and everybody knew it except for his manager. And I made a comment, I made a public comment through like one of the social media feeds, like, this is why people are annoyed with this organization, because they say stuff that we all know isn't true. And I understand the idea that like a manager needs to protect his player. Fine. A manager doesn't need to play him 50% of the time when he's clearly a bad player. A manager doesn't need to leave him in there late in the game when he's got other options on the bench because he wants to let this guy who's never going to be part of your future and isn't any good right now get his at bat late in the game. And it was costing them wins. And again, losses don't matter. You can't draft in the top 10. So why not try to find a way to win a game? Right? That's what my problem is with the Martin Maldonado thing. I didn't expect Pedro to say he's a crappy player and I'm kind of stuck with him. But I didn't want Pedro to try to defend the overuse of him. And that's what annoys your fan base more than anything else, when you treat us like idiots. And thank goodness he's gone. And we won't be treated like idiots when it comes to Maldonado. My fear again, though, becomes we'll be treated like idiots when it comes to Brooks Baldwin when he's playing 3 days a week.
Yep, welcome to the Nicky Lopez is the new Martin Maldonado era.
I mean, it's possible. On the phone line with us right now to kick off the second half, the Sox nerd Dave Marin. He puts up all those incredible tidbits on the scoreboard during the game, and he comes on Sox in the Basement to give you even more in-depth stuff. And he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and check out their Quarry Summer Concert Series with performances this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me this week?
Chris, let's take a look at a few quirks in the White Sox 2025 schedule, which was released on Thursday. The Sox open season number 125 on March 27th at home against the Angels. It will be the earliest opener in team history, surpassing 2019 and this year when the season began on March 28th. The home finale is also early next season. The 2025 guaranteed rate field closer is September 21st. The last time the Sox closed their home season earlier than that was in 1998 when they finished on September 20th. The Sox will play in a new stadium in 2025. When the Sox visit Sacramento to take on the A's next April 25th, it will mark, by my count, the 77th different venue in which they will have played. It will also be the 9th different venue in which they have played the A's. That's 2 in Philadelphia, 3 in Chicago, 1 in Kansas City, 1 in Oakland, and 1 in Milwaukee, and then Sacramento. There will be no holiday home games in 2025. The Sox are at Boston on Easter Sunday, April 20th, at the Mets on Memorial Day, May 26th, at Colorado on the 4th of July, and they are idle on Labor Day, September 8th. As for Mother and Father's Day, the Sox are home to face Miami on Mom's Day, May 11th, and in Texas for Dad's Day on June 15th. The Sox will play in Boston on Patriots Day on April 21st, giving us that cool 10 a.m. Central start on a Monday. This will be the Sox 6th game on the day, with the last coming in 2021, which ended with Danny Mendick on the mound. The Sox are part of MLB's new, quote, rivalry week in 2025, and fittingly, the Sox will be playing the Cubs from May 16th to May 18th at Wrigley Field. The Sox host the Cubs July 25th to 27th, marking the return of the 6-game series against the Northsiders. The last 3 seasons, the series has been just 4 games. We don't get Ohtani. The Sox are in LA July 1st to 3rd, but we get the Brewers April 29th to May 1st, the Cardinals June 17th to the 19th, the Phillies July 28th to the 30th, and the Yankees for 4 to close out August. June and August have the most home dates with 16 each, while the Sox play just 9 home games in September. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder, you can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there's plenty of Sox nerd material on Twitter and on the scoreboard at Guaranteed Rate Field. My zinger. Tuesday marked the 3rd time a Sox pitcher had faced the Home Run Derby champ in the All-Star game. In 2000, James Baldwin got Sammy Sosa to pop out. 5 years later, Mark Burley gave up a game-starting single to Bobby Abreu before Crochet with the Dodgers' Teoscar Hernandez on Tuesday. Oh, and one more. Martin Maldonado departs the Sox as the all-time leader among number 9 hitters with 58 homers. Of course, he hit 3 of those for the Sox. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about the schedule, Sacramento, Patriots Day, and of course, Martin Maldonado.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.